This is Ably House Podcast.
All right, welcome everyone to our podcast here about the Beatles, the Ably House Podcast. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Bob Ferrera, or Bobby Ferrera. Really doesn't matter. This here is...
I'm Andrew Bockelman.
Or Bockelman, or Bocklebees.
Yeah.
And then we have over here...
All of the three.
I'm Neil Candelora.
Neil Wesley Candelora.
Neil Wesley Candelora. NWC.
Yeah, exactly. Hence NWC. So you may have heard that name before, NWC. Well, that's where it comes from, Neil Wesley Candelora. So let's just dive right into it. The latest song that Ably House has put online, Please Please Me.
Yeah.
And when did you guys write this song? Is it,
Well, I wish,
You did not. You're not.
It'd be
the
nice
writers
if
of
we
the
all
song.
got some money from that, but
Yeah, we're not included.
we're not included.
So,
in the
as
royalties.
you guys may know, I don't know how in depth you are in Beatles knowledge. Please Please Me. The first number one hit.
First
by
number
the
one
Beatles,
hit, yeah.
by the Beatles. John wrote it on his bed in an attempt to come up with a type of Roy Orbison, Only the Lonely type song. It started off as a ballad. George Martin, their producer, suggested...
R.I.P.
R.I.P., yes. But he had a good poosh.
Very good
He had a
poosh,
good
yeah.
run.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he suggested that he speed it up, and if they sped it up, it would become a smash, and it did, of course. And and the rest is history.
That's
so
history. Yeah.
I think the original version you can hear on Anthology. You can hear the slowed down Roy Orbison version. Originally, I thought that was like a lost take, but I guess that's the one that
and
it was found.
has I wouldn't say slow down. It's just it's not Ringo. It's
that
Andy
has
White.
Andy White. Yeah,
It has Andy
right.
White on drums. It's the same
Right.
day they did P.S. I Love You and the Love Me Do.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Question mark. Andy White.
No,
I
Andy
think
White's
R.I.P.
pushing.
R.I.P.
Oh, he's still
he's
alive.
I think so.
We should
yeah.
have him on the
Well,
podcast.
Still
we
rest
should
in
have him-
peace. I mean,
yeah.
he still sleeps. So we still want him to rest in peace when he
do.
does rest.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't wish
Not permanently rest in
nightmares
peace.
on the
Not
guy.
Crip. Anyway. Anyway.
So
So back in these days, this was one of the songs that they recorded during that marathon session.
No. Well,
Or-
yes,
or
yes.
wasn't it? During
It was.
February 11th, 1963, where they recorded 12 songs, ending with Twist and Shout at the very end.
Right.
Yeah.
Where John had his shirt off and was just screaming. So this was part of that marathon session. Back then, they did it all together, all live in the same room in Studio 2.
yeah.
I don't think they even had headphones back then.
No,
did
no, no,
they?
there wasn't.
This is pre
And
65,
I
right?
think they had those monitors so they could kind of hear the vocals a little bit, but it was
Right.
pretty. I think they're you can hear in the vocal tracks, you can hear everything in the room and the instrumental tracks too. And if their monitors, they're not very loud, and they had it set up. Originally, George Martin wanted to record a Live at the Cavern Club album as their first push.
Would have been a good idea.
Would have been a good idea, but
Yeah.
so essentially they compromised. They had them set up in the studio how they played live. They had the kit and then the
Right.
amps in front of the kit and then the mics like how they would on a stage. And it has a very live sound because of that, for sure.
A reverby kind of sound.
Yeah, very roomy. That you hear the drums and the guitars and the vocal mics for sure.
And to capture that, is there any sort of what did you do to capture that reverb?
Well,
Well, what they did was reamping the reverb as well.
yeah, they had
Reamping the instruments into a
echo
geared-
chamber.
An echo chamber.
Echo
Yeah.
chamber. Yeah, that's what they did. Back in the day, there was no digital reverbs. Every studio had an echo chamber, and they put a speaker in the echo chamber and play it into it. But
Played the song that had already been recorded.
yeah, or
into it, and
instruments. Like in the I Saw Her Standing
I
There.
see.
I
the
think it
solo.
actually might be a live room that is always set up so you can get live reverb just out of the chamber.
Yeah, they a lot of the
into-
times. A lot of times they recorded with the effects on the vocals. I Saw Her Stand There. I think Please Please Me they mixed later because when you hear like the original takes, is there a reverb on the guitar for the solo? I feel like there's not, and they added that as they're mixing because
yeah.
everyth's
I don't
not
know.
as compressed and stuff in the end. But for us, we have the Waves Abbey Road plugins, and there's a Chambers one that's supposed to mimic the echo chambers in Abbey Road, and I have a little bit of that on it, and also I have that set to kind of like a room sound, and I feather the drums and a little bit of the guitars and bass in there just to try to mimic it all being in a room together because we unfortunately don't record together just logistically, and we're just trying to capture the parts as accurately as possible.
Right. So how do you compensate for the lack of, because there would have been bleed over, right? There would have
Yeah.
been bleed over from other
Right.
from like the drum mics
Yeah.
from the vocals or the vocals from the drums.
Right.
So did you do anything to
we
compensate
use
for
the
that?
plugins this time. Sometimes on other songs we've reamped stuff. Like with Brendan's recording drums, I play the bass in like the next room while he's recording, so it bleeds onto that track.
Right.
I just used plugins this time. And whatnot for Please Please Me. We're talking about
Please Please Me.
Please Please
Yes.
Me.
Right,
Still on
of course.
Please Please Me.
Still on Please Please
Yeah.
Me. That's good. Yeah. And we try to get as accurate with the guitars as possible, which we're still collecting a lot of guitars.
Yeah.
The Beatles tended to play these weird one-off guitars, and then because
Right.
they played it, they're super expensive. So it's hard to.
Of course, they weren't expensive back then.
They weren't
if you were one of
expensive.
the lucky few to actually get
Exactly.
Rickenbacker 325 in 1963 or whatever.
right? Yeah,
it
2
was-
or 3, and same thing. Now I've heard that John's using the J160 for this, and after
And George maybe as
and
well.
I believe
right.
George's as well. That
As an overdub?
Yeah,
As a-
because
No, as the final
they're
take.
both playing J160s plugged into the amp. I think. For
Oh,
Please
really?
Please Me. Yeah,
Oh,
like the
okay.
don't sounds
So
like
not Rickenbacker for that.
not Rickenbacker. We used a Duojet and the Rickenbacker because the I don't know, the J160 we have is the new Epiphone one, and it's a
Yeah.
little buzzy, and sometimes it just doesn't quite.
It's not the same.
It sounds what we did. I think sounds better.
It's
than
not
if we'd done
something you're proud recording.
Yeah,
And of course, they played it live with
They played
the
it live.
instruments that you see in the video too.
yeah, right,
So
right, exactly. And
there's an element of
but
reality.
but
to that.
really,
Right.
the J160s back in the day, they were made with this special bracing. Nowadays, they're made with this ladder X bracing. Back in the day, they had this like straight across bracing. I don't know what you call it, but essentially, back in the day, they were supposed to be an electric guitar, so they made it a very dead sound. So
An
it wouldn't
acoustic
feedback.
electric? Like
no,
you-
like you could play it, but it had the pickup in it, so it was meant to be
Right.
plugged into an amp. So the bracing deadened the sound of the guitar, so it wouldn't feed back as much, and that's why the J160s that Beatles play have a very brittle, weird kind of dead sound. It's
So when did
very-
that? What year did that change then?
I don't know. I don't know when they stopped making J160s. I want to say early 70s. Sorry, internet. Correct me if I'm wrong about this. They released another model again in the early 90s. Gibson did, and that has regular acoustic bracing. And those are
Okay.
fine guitars, but they don't sound quite.
They're not the same.
They made. I know they made a John Lennon edition in the Let It Be show. We had one that had a John Lennon signature in the headstock, and that one had the ladder bracing. And it sounded good.
Oh, wow.
And there's also a ceramic bridge in the bottom too.
Okay.
And I think either bone or ceramic nut at the top. But whenever I pick up a vintage J160 and play it, it's like clearly like that's what that guitar sounds like.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the harmonica too, right? That's sort of not a one-off, but it's a unique harmonica that
Right.
needs to be used for
I
Please
think
Please
it's a
Me, right?
G chromatic. I have a C chromatic.
But it
so
is a chromatic though. It's not
It's
like
gotta
your
be
standard.
chromatic, yeah.
Right. You have
Yeah.
to be switching it over as you're playing it, right? You have
I'm
to,
pretty sure.
yeah,
I haven't played it in G, but I imagine.
But you used a C
I used a
chromatic
C.
for it.
That's all they have
If
at
you
Guitar
use a
Center.
chromatic though, what's the difference if it's C chromatic? If you can do every note,
Because I don't think it's C. Oh, I see. Right.
if you can
the-
do all
I
12
think it's
notes,
just
then
what
what's the
begins
difference?
and
the
ends.
starting
I see.
place
I
has
see.
the
Okay.
F sharp for G would be just
Just
like a
so-
regular
But if you can
blower
play
draw.
Please Me on both of them, I don't think there is much of a difference. Unless
I think you could play it on both.
You can
but
hit
there's-
every note.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
the time where you switch over would be different on a G than on a C.
exactly. That's the only
technically.
difference. I don't know if is there any sound. difference
Tonally,
between
I'm
them.
not
So,
sure.
Tonally,
yeah.
probably not.
I think
but
it was still a Horner.
I guess it's
Okay.
based on what's easier to play. If it's
Sure,
at that point, right?
sure.
So you did that, right? You did the harmonica.
I
on
did,
this, Okay.
yeah.
And that was in the early Beatles
You stepped up.
phase. It was you stepped up. You did what you had to
I
do.
did my best. Yeah,
You're a hero.
Earlier
Thank you for your service.
Sort of
Yeah,
John
you're
McCain
welcome.
of
You're
your day.
welcome.
Yeah.
It's over
R.I.P.
with. Right?
R.I.P. John McCain.
John McCain.
Yeah.
So this is obviously filmed after August 26th or
August,
whatever it was.
yeah.
Yeah.
For the George guitars, like you were saying, some guitars sound like they're not even mixed in there. Like the George on the verse, that he's kind of playing along with the melody, and it's buried away, and you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes, because in the live videos
Right.
you point out that
I think the engineers may have mixed it out, only kept it in there when they needed that dun 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 dun.
I definitely think
dun,
that's the
dun,
case. I
and then
definitely
they
think.
pulled it down.
Yeah.
Because the same thing in the bridge. There's this riff that he does every single time. I don't know what's the sing the.
I don't wanna
sound complaining much, you know there's always been
There's a riff right here. Bum, bada, bum.
Yeah,
he does it every time, but
I
you
mixed
don't
it
hear
down.
it.
We were mixing it
You gotta
tonight
mix
because
it down.
I was like,
it's weird, right?
I was like, oh, I don't really.
So how
hear
did
that.
you hear
I
that?
think they took
Live
because it's
or-
every single live video. It's on BBC.
He also differs from the harmonica part in going back into the third verse, right?
And you don't really hear it. I think they turned that down too.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
Is that a mistake, or did he want to do it something?
He does
different?
that every time.
He does
live,
that every
too.
time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's a thing. And
It's a
then
thing.
yeah, you're right. And definitely all the riffs like the down pop up.
Yeah, they pop the zoom, and you said even the
Boom, boom,
reverb
boom,
sound
boom,
like
boom.
it's
Yes,
boosted.
like
the
they
reverb
boost
is-
it into the chamber there and stuff. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
definitely mixing
right.
live, and that's definitely the thing too with the Beatles. Like I think they tuck down John's guitar unless there's specific moments
Unless
it
it
needs to
needs to
stand
be
out.
there, yeah.
Because there's a lot going on. It's a very like kind of loud in your face album. The hi-hats are there. There doesn't need to be that much string action. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and especially with the Beatles, at that point on early '60s, anything with Beatles in general, vocal mixes it's a very vocal heavy mix. And that's
Well, they knew they had four singers,
Yeah.
but mainly, three. They knew they wanted to. George Martin was. I mean, he first of all did a great job at capturing the Cavern Club on record.
he did.
Secondly, it says Beatles, a new vocal group on the first album.
Right.
A vocal. He was also trying to sell them, I think, as a
Yeah.
vocal group. So he wanted to feature everyone, and
Yeah.
so that makes sense. All right, so
yeah.
let's keep talking about it. Let's talk about the drums, since we don't have our drummer Brendan Pielzar here.
R.I.P.,
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the drum. Maybe like, what do you want to talk about? The miking.
Well, I can talk about
The snare sound.
We can
The
talk
snare
about.
volume?
We can talk about. Yeah, miking. I know on the record they. I can only speak for. I know they use I think they use a Coles ribbon mic for the overhead. I think we set up. We have a ribbon mic and the WA-47
Yeah,
U-47
that's
mic.
right.
I went with the U-47. The other ribbon mic was
It
just
just
too dark.
sounds
It just
nice.
sounds more Beatle-y and nice.
Yeah.
And same thing. I've recorded these songs before with just a D19 just to get a Beatle sound in general.
The ribbon was really dark, and we're recording in one of the deadest rooms.
Yeah.
The Beatles recorded in a big open room where there's a lot of reverb coming
Right.
back at you, and in
also,
a room like that, yeah.
In my opinion, I've used a Coles once as an overhead. That is like one of the best mics ever, especially for drum overheads. It's just like you can just have the overhead and it's like a complete drum sound.
Yeah.
It's an amazing mic. And that ribbon mic we has is fine. I forget exactly what it is, but it's like a $200 or $300 mic. It's not the same as one of those.
Right. Okay.
I know kit wise, Ringo was using a Premier kit at the time. He hadn't gotten a Ludwig kit yet, and he was using a piccolo snare at the time as well.
And they weren't miking the snare.
It was just the overhead and kick.
Yeah, right.
And I think they were using a ribbon kick mic too. It's like a big black mic.
Not the D20?
I don't think the D20 was there yet. I think it's that. I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't have recording the Beatles. I've perused through it a few times. I was perusing through it last night. And I saw the
Right.
picture during.
Right.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the board that they were using at the time?
In fact, do you know what song? Seven Nation Army was mixed on the
Wow.
Please Please Me board. Yeah,
On that one? Okay.
Because I think that went to
Detroit.
Switched over
Torak
from
Studios
the-
in London.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think they bought either it's the Please Please Me board or it's the same model of boards they had
Like
in Abbey
flatter
Road.
or whatever. Didn't at some point it become sloped?
It comes sloped.
Like
it was flat. I think it was the 17.17, the red desk is what they would call it at the time.
Right.
But
Okay.
yeah. So Southern Nation Army was either mixed on the board or the same model of boards that they were working on in Abbey Road at the time. So one of the boards, one of the
Sure.
3 or 4 boards they had in Abbey Road at the time. Yeah, I personally, I think "Please Please Me" as an album too, as long as the song is a very unique sounding album. It's one of the more distinct. I think the first and last Beatle album are the two most distinct sounding albms. Abbey Road has a very distinct sound because they used solid state boards.
I mean,
for
it
the first
does.
time.
It sounds primitive for the Beatles, but only in an all-encompassing context.
exactly,
does it
all-encompassing
sound
context.
primitive? If you listen to it, in summer of '63 or when was
Yeah.
it released? May of '63, something like that.
something
April,
like
maybe.
that.
It was not like nothing that was out at that time.
Exactly, and I think it's a very lively sounding album. And personally, I think it's the
Yeah.
best bass sound until Sgt. Pepper too. Like it's a very present bass sound.
even
and-
Revolver, even more so than Revolver.
Yeah, you could make the argument Revolver. I just think like the songs, Please Please Me are standing there. Like the bass is so present.
So
maybe
what?
that-
What fell then? Obviously, there was
I don't know. I know Paul's using his first Hofner, the cavern bass, on it.
With the Beatles mix, the bass was just quieter.
The bass
for
is
the
quiet, and
mixes.
just with the
Right.
Beatles in general is kind of, in my
They just
opinion,
didn't value it
it's just
as
like a
much.
messier,
Yeah.
kind of just like louder, messier mix a little bit. I don't know if messy is the right word. It's just very like
Slapped together.
slap. I don't know. It's very them trying to make like a loud pop album for the time.
Half-assed. That's what you're trying to say.
No, it just is a different sound that I don't think is as cool sounding as Please Please Me as a record.
Sure.
You know.
I always thought that this isn't like canon of Beatles, but it's that Meet the Beatles, just the order of Meet the Beatles, just the first 6 of Meet the Beatles was like probably the best. I don't know. There's few comparisons of that kind of energy and originality.
They're using Please
and-
Please Me recordings for, you know what I mean? Because doesn't it open with I Saw Her Standing There?
No, it opens with I Want to Hold Your Hand, which we can use.
But
that
isn't I
as-
Saw Her Standing There on Meet the Beatles?
It is second. It's second
Second.
on Meet the
Ah,
Beatles.
well, you
and
know.
then it's This Boy. It's a good flow, you know.
It is a
and
very
then
good
and then
flow.
ups again with It Won't Be Long, and then it sort of goes to With the Beatles at that point.
Yeah.
But that first 6 is that's sort of what hooked me when I was
Sure.
9 first listening to
No,
to
yeah,
Beatles.
that's-
like
Yeah.
it's one of those things you want to just constantly listen to over and over again.
You're getting singles mixed with the album songs.
You are,
in that
of course,
case.
yeah. It's cheating a little
It's
bit.
cheating.
A little bit,
yeah.
But yeah, they took.
It's
the
like
But
Penny
for
Strawberry
Americans,
Fields and
Americans
Penny
had. I mean, no wonder they
And-
had 5. You know, hit the
Right.
top 5 in the Billboard.
And
were
also,
Beatles
yeah, in
songs.
America too, America's at the time where everything good was coming from. Like there was no real like solid British artists that had competed.
And it was a
in
little
long time.
stale and stagnant in late '63. Also,
Yeah.
like it's not a I mean, it is a coincidence, but it's sort of like kismet with the Kennedy assassination happening at that time, and it's like the mood is down in the country.
Yeah.
And then, literally on November 22nd, 1963, is when Meet the Beatles
Right,
was
yeah.
released.
Literally, we talked
It
about this
was
last night. Literally everything
totally
went right with them.
a synchronicity.
The exact day Kennedy gets assassinated, their first album drops.
Right, and it's like, here, take your mind off of your country falling apart. You know? That actually is a good segue into our next song, I Want to Hold Your Hand. This is more of songwriting-wise, more of a collaboration between John and Paul. And
Yeah.
Please Please Me. Please
As-
Please Me is almost like Strictly John.
Strictly John.
And I Want to Hold Your Hand is one of those where they were
Paul said
eye
he
to
was.
eye.
John said the eye to eye thing. Paul agreed. Paul was there when John wrote "Please Please Me." He said he was there.
Sure, but it was a John. John wanted the Roy Orbison song.
Yes.
John sort of like...
It's definitely John's song. For
You
sure.
can hear
Yeah.
John doing the soaring Roy Orbison. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure Paul could do that too.
No. But it's definitely John's song, and Paul at the most was probably just guiding it at that point.
Right.
I Want to Hold Your Hand is probably one of the biggest, I'd say, collaborations of the entire. Like, if it just seems like there's not a single part of that song I can tell one or the other wrote it. It just seems like they were.
I think Paul wrote the da na 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 na, and he said when he did that, that's when he knew it was going to be big. That was recorded sort of the same way, I guess, as Please Please Me, right? Or
I think their setup had started to change a little bit. They always were kind of in the studio corner of Studio 2. I don't think they were doing like the live setup anymore. I think they were kind of facing. They kind of put the bass behind like a thing, the bass amp. I think the guitar amps were totally straight on. Mic wise, I'm not sure, and I think I should have looked this up beforehand. I want to look at the day it was recorded, but it could be one of the first recordings with the Hofner on it, because I know
okay.
Paul got his Hofner. I want to say either late September, early October '63.
So Please Please Me was the cavern.
Cavern bass, and a lot of
bass, okay.
with the Beatles songs are still
Okay.
Cavern. And once he got, it was kind of falling apart. Like the pickup was being held in with tape
Right.
and stuff. You know, he'd been using it forever and for hundreds of shows. And he got a newer one with Hofner, which is the bass we all know that's branded with him. And I Want to Hold Your Hand might be one of the first tracks with it. I'm not sure exactly when Hand was recorded though.
Summer of '63.
That was fall.
generally.
That was fall.
November 8th of like
That late?
63.
Yeah, well,
Wow,
that's definitely
okay.
if it's November, then it's definitely I would say it's definitely the new Hofner.
Okay.
It's definitely the Hofner on it.
Are you doing that or on the recording? Are you
I
playing
am,
with?
and for the Please Please Me songs, I did it on the
On the Cavern?
bass
Right.
that I have. That's refinished Revolution style, but we kind of think there's kind of a lore, a folklore going on that George used this Rickenbacker. What's
The
number?
Rickenbacker that he got, I don't know what the name of it is,
Yeah.
but it's the one he got in Illinois when he was visiting Luis
Hey. Yeah.
in Illinois somewhere.
Yes, well, yeah, he went
right,
to
because
visit.
he was the first Beatle to come to America, right?
Yes,
To visit
yes.
his
He was,
sister.
yeah.
And he got this Rickenbacker guitar that's black, or I think he had it painted black. I think he bought it with fire glow, and he had it painted black
to match John's.
And I know he had a second pickup installed in it at some point because we saw it on the 2010 tour.
Right.
We saw it in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it had two pickups in it. But I know he got that installed later. I don't know if he got that by hand. But that's generally, people tend to think that that's the guitar in hand.
I think so. I think that opening, that open G has the Rickenbacker sound to it. And that's why I played it on the video. I do the John doing the dig-da-dang because it added that extra sound to it, whatever it is.
Yeah. I was talking about this with a friend of mine, Chris Cologne, and it's funny, like, because especially Beatles tribute shows and the Ed Sullivan show, like, the general kind of accepted George opening guitar is the country gent, but it's not on that many recordings at the end of the day.
Right,
Like, he had two. One fell off a truck and got ran over.
Right.
And
this is Doubtfire style when the mask gets run over. Yeah.
Well, he might have
Firestein was riding the truck.
He might have had three because he got two replacements, I think, for the one. There's a picture of him holding two country gentlemen.
He's only two. Yeah, but no, he got the new one before he got that as a replacement, and then the old one got destroyed.
So then there's three total, right?
No, there's two.
There's two total.
I think there's only two. Yeah,
he just had both of them at the same time.
And one of them fell off and got destroyed. And but it's not on that much because then I feel like then he got the 12 string in '64, and then by '65 he was using.
What was the first
Tennessean.
song that the 12 string was on?
Oof, I don't know, whatever the Hard Days Night
Call
session.
Your Name, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, one of those Hard Days Night sessions.
Okay.
I think the.
Because I Call Your Name was a little earlier than Hard Days Night.
Oh, really?
I Beats Lever because
Well, I think
because
he got it. He got
Beatles'
it.
second album came out before Hard Days Night.
He got it in America though.
Okay.
I think John, whoever was running Rickenbacker at the time, gave it to John. It was supposed to be John's guitar because there's pictures of John around Hard Days Night playing it too, like just holding it. And I think George just really liked it, and John wasn't as interested in it, And so George kept it.
Right.
So I think
John's
I
mistake.
want to say it was early on in the tour. I want to say it was early on in the American tour after Ed Sullivan show.
So around February then.
Around February, March. They started shooting Hard Days Night very soon after that tour.
Mm-hmm.
And all the songs, almost every song on Hard Days Night
What
has
a packed schedule for 1964.
Yeah, it's insane.
Like
Yeah.
show at like 2 shows a day for like 2 months in America, and then filming. And then recording
the album.
Yeah. And then all the press stuff that they had to do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And then Beatles for Sale, and then Christmas album.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just talking like spring of '64.
Oh, right,
just alone.
Yeah,
must have been nuts.
Very. Yeah.
So anyway, back to I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Back to Jam.
Instruments.
Do you want to talk about the
drums?
the actual like music part of it instead of just the instrumentation? Like musically, what is John doing versus what is George doing in that song? Like.
Yeah, John's leading the song rhythmically.
Yeah.
John is more with the drums and the bass, and George is more textural with the vocals and sitting in between what's going on with the vocals.
Right, the da na 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 na.
Yeah, right between. And
or the right, those little like
it just it falls between,
things.
and then
right.
I want to hold your hand, and then George fills that space with a
that
riff.
thing. Yeah,
right. So his role is really just following the vocals and sitting behind that. And John is
John's
driving,
chunky driving lead,
right?
And I was thought about this too. The Beatles had this fresh early on, kind of figured out these frequency ranges to sit in. Like John's guitar in that song is pretty dark. Like it's pretty dark sound.
Oh yeah,
and it kind of sits in this mid low situation. And Paul's bass is taking out the bass, and then George has got kind of the trebly guitar,
right?
And it all kind of fits together, and they all kind of play their separate roles and stuff.
So I actually couldn't get the Rick bassy enough when I was recording it, so I recorded a DI, and then I sent the DI back through the amp with an EQ on it to get that really bassy, chunky Rickenbacker sound.
Sure.
Did you use that? Because I sent it to you later. Do you remember that?
I think I used that, and I also EQ'd it more. I took more top off it and added more bottom on it. Yeah, it's.
It almost sounds like a bass guitar playing
like
chords. It's
right.
Yeah.
It's
and
really,
amp. Why are you guys using the same amps?
Well, we're using an AC30, but they're not the same. Like the vintage AC30s just have this. It just sounds like there's a compressor in there. It just like compresses it. It just has this very unique guitar. I'm not a total expert on that stuff. I have a friend, Doug Cox, who knows every amp they use every session. I know for the Please Please Me sessions, John was using It was an AC-15 in an AC-30 cabinet, I think, with a single speaker. But once again, it's this weird one-off Vox amp type of thing that like no one ever has besides John Lennon.
Since then, hasn't been right.
But Vox makes fine amplifiers now, but they don't ever quite have the. Every time I've ever heard anyone play a vintage Vox amp from the '60s, it's like, wow, oh my god, like it just doesn't even compare. It's like there's this weird compressed sound to it that it just doesn't happen anymore. It's a shame. It's a shame.
That's a shame.
But I'm trying.
How about the drum setup? How about the like the curtain? What do you call it? The backing thing. What did Ringo? Yeah, what did Ringo use for that?
I don't know. They had some stuff behind it that was just They usually sat in the corner of Studio 2, like diagonal from the control room.
Okay.
And they had sort of like a trifold baffle thing that would go behind Ringo's drums.
Not the one with the windows. It was
no, that came in '67. I want to say 67.
Right.
Sorry, internet, if I'm wrong.
By All You Need Is Love, or what?
Yeah, definitely by Pepper. They're using those Windows ones. No, they were kind of these drabby, dirty, thick. Things. Like they
asbestos filled,
asbestos and smoke filled. Like obviously every drummer in the world blew smoke into it.
Right.
I'm not sure what they're using mic wise. It still might be Coles. I think it might still be a Coles and the rim mic and the kick drum, but still same thing. Only 2 drum mics probably.
Yeah.
And those early Beatles recordings that you really only hear like hi-hat.
So who were just a side question besides George Martin? Who were the engineers in those days?
Originally
in '63.
It was Norm Smith originally.
Okay.
Norm Hurricane Smith, who ended up like having a hit song at one point. And they wrote
The Hurricane, right? 1975. Oh wait, no, that's Bob Dylan. Okay.
This is the story of Norm Hurricane Smith. Yeah.
That is also me. I'm writing about myself.
I'm not sure when Jeff Emmerich came aboard. I don't know if it was that early, but I want to say it was
I
earlier.
don't think so.
Oh, Jeff Emmerich was involved from like Please Please Me, like very first sessions.
He was
involved? Just like a 16-year-old intern. I don't know how involved
I
he
think
was.
Just taking notes.
I think
in
he's
the
like
back.
the tape op. If
I
that's the
see.
case.
Tape
Like
op,
he's
right.
literally
I
like
think
just
that is
pressing
it.
play
Yeah.
while the other engineer
And then he did a
runs.
good enough job pressing play.
Is there anything playing wise with hands, like musically, like how he played things? Because I forgot about.
Are you talking about John or
just in general, like any of us, like because there are things in the videos I feel like I wish I could communicate, but I just play, I just mimic it. But there are things like I didn't notice for a long time, like sorry to double back, but like please me. The bass line for the Come Ons is I always used to go. It's like boom 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 boom, but it does a thing like that. But I notice it. He does like almost he chokes the notes in certain points. It's like boom 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 boom.
Oh, mutes it.
Boom, boom.
Yeah.
Like it's very musical in that sense, and Paul does that a lot on the bass early on, and he's always musical. He's always very musical with anything. But there are those things. It's different than just playing a line. Like there's articulations and things you pick up on in these songs. It's hard to communicate by just playing, especially if you do it well, because then it sounds like the recording and people just accept it. I think
Right.
Well, in I Want to Hold Your Hand, does John continue the strumming during the bridge, or does he do the arpeggio thing?
He slides up like a D, like an F6 to a G6.
I
shape.
see. That's cool.
He keeps that.
I didn't know that.
That was
Okay.
something
Yeah.
I discovered in it. But I remember doing.
So he's doing at the beginning of the bridge. He's doing
dum,
it up at the
dum,
top as a D6 kind of,
Yeah.
or an F6. I mean,
F6
yeah.
or like a D minor
Okay.
with the third on the
Wow.
bottom.
Okay.
The Jim.
And then slides up to like a G6?
Yep. And then
Cool.
he goes down to a C and A minor, and he kind of stays in that box there.
Also, I'd like to point out too that Hand and From Me to You, the Beatles kind of do a thing where they go to a minor 5 and the bridge it goes into the key.
And
of
From Me
4.
to You.
Yeah,
Right,
From Me to You. They
yeah.
both go to the minor 5, and that kind of becomes the 2 in a way, right?
They had little things like that they stuck onto.
They
Like
stuck
in the
onto-
Help era, well, like late 64, early 65, they did this B minor G thing.
Yeah, the 6 to
Oh,
4.
but
yeah.
any song that was in D, they
Paul
did a B
did
minor.
that. Paul did that.
Yeah, he was. But they
it was
had
him.
things. The point they had things they got hung up on. I know
Yes,
Paul
yes.
said he loved the D to A minor progression. He said he really liked.
Yeah. They definitely got hung up on things. But I shouldn't. That's not a bad thing. They hooked on
tied
to
it.
things.
No, it's
all
good.
the albums and eras
Exactly.
together. It was a
Exactly.
nice thing.
Obviously, From Me to You and
any
one
good
alternator
musician,
from-
Yeah.
like
Snare.
they dwell on something. There's like
Yeah.
I want to recreate that as much and as best as I can. You know.
Yeah, right. But the Beatles also always moved past it.
Sure,
Like,
right.
they
They got
literally-
their fill of it.
they got their fill of
well,
it,
and
and then
also
they-
not just because their own proclivities, but I think they were forced to come out with an album every 6 months.
Exactly.
So it's like they had to move on.
Right.
beyond
It's
that.
really amazing the amount of various melodies and just the variation in their music is insane.
I want to talk
and they're all
about that
good.
a little bit.
Sure.
How every album sort of had its own, because of a certain particular instrument, had its own sound. Like Rubber Soul has a sound of its own a lot because of the tambourine. Like every
Yeah.
song has a
Every
tambourine
song has
in Rubber
tambourine.
Soul. Hard Day's Night, the 12 string. You know, do you want to talk about that a little bit with Please Please Me to With the Beatles? Like what are their particular tones based around, do you think?
Abbey Road's tones based around having 3-part harmonies. That
Yeah.
for some reason
Yes.
it's not. They've done 3-part harmonies before,
And
but
eight
Did
the
they
way it's
actually do those in a vocal booth in Abbey Road? I thought in Abbey Road they finally started doing it in a vocal booth.
They might have,
as opposed to
if it was a vocal booth, I
just
can't
out
speak
in
for
the
that.
studio, you
the
know?
first time they
picture-
sounded like Queen, almost like
Yeah.
full sounding.
Well, yeah, because
3-part
they-
because 9
8 tracks too.
Yeah, right.
they-
well, it was
could-
3-part triple track
That-
like
on
Bohemian
because-
Rhapsody,
on
right?
Because they did
Yeah.
exactly. That is the Queen method,
Yeah.
3-part triple tracked. But Queen would do that.
Bohemian
3-part
Rhapsody,
at
October
every-
24th.
Yeah. Hey, my birthday. You know. But yeah, I'm not sure about the vocal booth thing for Abbey Road. Every picture I've seen for Abbey Road sessions,
They're
still
out?
They're still out.
Okay.
If
when
they,
did they use the vocal booth?
I don't know. If they ever did, they would just set up the baffles around the mic. I don't know.
Really?
I can't think of many pictures where I've ever seen. I always
I
feel like
thought
they're
I
just in the
saw in
studio.
recording the Beatles a vocal booth.
I'm sure
that
they
they
did.
made. Maybe
Yeah.
Pepper or something.
They did everything at some
Yeah,
point. They
yeah.
literally tried out everything at some point. So it's hard to say they did or didn't do something. I know past a certain point, it's anything goes a little bit
Right.
with them. You know, as far as the Please Please Me with the Beatles though, I don't know. There's definitely a sound and an energy to it. Please Please Me is very fresh sounding to me. It's very like in like they're very green, but they're obviously amazingly talented. It's very lively. With the Beatles, sounds a little more like a produced album, but I don't know, the hi-hats are a little more way in the mix. And Ringo talks about that, how that was the early sound of the Beatles, was this wash of cymbals and
Right.
hi-hats. And that's very much what the
like
Beatles
the
sound.
screaming fan sound.
Yeah, it
That's
literally
kind
is.
of what
It sounds like
reminds me of.
Hollywood Bowl or something.
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
But you still, if you want to, you can hear every individual instrument, I feel like.
Yeah, the bass is definitely muddier, but and I've talked about this with you.
The guitars can mix together too, and you
They
can
do
not really
and
tell.
a lot of times, I feel like you can't even really hear the John guitar. A lot of
Oh,
times,
yeah.
it's literally like there's very little rhythm guitar with the Beatles that's present in the
Well,
mix.
you're hearing it. It's just not. It's almost subconscious. It's like it's like
it's very
Yeah.
low. It's very low.
meshed in.
It's either meshed in or it's very low. Like all I gotta do, really like you mainly just hear one guitar in that song.
Right.
I think John's also using the J160 on
Yeah,
that song
he
as
is.
well.
I think we were just cresting into All I've Got to Do.
Yeah, let's crest.
right.
So let's
crest, baby.
fully crest. Let's.
I don't want to get. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So All I've Got to Do. It's a little more. I mean, of all the songs, I think on With the Beatles, where you can hear the individual instruments on there, where it's not sort of a mesh or a wall of sound. It's this. It's very sharp.
Yes.
So, is there anything specific that makes that different than any other With the Beatles recording, like I Want to Hold Your Hand?
I would say
or-
so. It kind of, to me, calls back to Anna a little bit with the drum part and the way the bass works with the drums. And it's kind of showing Paul thinking of from a production standpoint and an arranging standpoint too. You know, like the bass, where the bass hits with the drums. Also, when I always played the song, I always cut the bass off. The don, 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 don. And he does that for the first verse, but then a couple of the verses, he holds it out. It's like don, 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 don. But you know what I mean? The way the bass with the
He's
chords,
working with the drums.
He's working with the drums
It's a,
and
it's
leaving
a
a lot.
rhythm section.
It's
yeah.
a very heavy.
leaving
it's like
space.
right. It's like heavy to nothing. Like
Right.
don, don. Yeah, and
Which,
that's
like not a lot of songs did back then.
Exactly.
Not even a lot of Beatles songs did back then.
yeah. It's very
Leave space, which is like, oh, that's
right. Exactly.
cool.
And it really
it
matches the mood
grooves.
of that song too. That song definitely has a mood and a feel, and I feel like that's because of it. And there's a lot of crazy bass action in that song too. Some really cool early Paul going nuts on the bass stuff. There's some really
During
quick
which
runs.
sections?
During the pre-chorus into the chorus, there's a lot of doom doom do like
yeah.
little
Right.
quick runs like that you don't
That he
necessarily
did later
notice.
on too. He
Yes.
did. He would use that doodle-doo.
Yeah.
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 Those are also bass chords in the verse, right?
Yeah, yeah, the fifths.
Oh, it's the
that,
fifths,
That in
right.
itself is very inventive.
Very inventive. I felt like he was doing that a lot around 63, 64, and then he got out of it. And I haven't heard him do it again until looking at her on New during the why can't she see? He's playing chords in that section. And he kind of never really hasn't done that since the early 60s, since 63, 64. Unless I can't really think of anything later Beatles where he does chords. It's kind of very early Beatles. A Hand, he does that. He does it a little bit in If I Fell. The last two notes of All My Loving, he does it too.
Oh,
the last
right.
two notes.
Yeah.
Do, 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 do. That last hit
Isn't there
is a
something
fifth.
in something? Doesn't he do something in that song? Doesn't he do an octave thing like a?
There's an overdubbed octave.
Oh, it's
bass.
overdubbed,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, but it's and they are in octaves during the bridge and at the end of the song.
Okay.
Dum, dum, is in octaves. But yeah, never two separate notes again, really. But yeah, kind of innovative there. I was talking about, Paul, originally the line of the Beatles was John, George, and Paul play guitar. And Paul's a
Right.
very, very excellent lead guitar player, too. I think enjoyed playing the bass, but definitely didn't play it traditionally like bass.
Played it like a guitar. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's what he knew.
The early Beatles is when he's the most traditional, I'd say, with bass. And even then, he's playing a lot of riffs on it. and
Right.
stuff,
It's like it's too much of a prison for him
Yeah.
to just do the standard
Fifth,
bass.
fifth,
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, and
He said like Brian Wilson was the only other bass player of his time that he thought was on his level.
I felt like
James
James Jamerson, too.
Yeah, I think that was an oversight. on his-
I've heard him say him, Brian Wilson, and James Jamerson,
And
were
James
the three
Jamerson,
guys.
yeah.
And I
Well,
think he credits James Jamerson
I think there's a
as
lot
being,
of James. Yeah.
being like the guy, kind of,
I feel like Paul takes influence from the wash bucket basses, the doom 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 type of
Yes,
thing.
Sure.
Like the
Rockabilly
the
stuff.
skiffle
Yeah.
and the rockabilly.
I've
yeah.
noticed, especially when he switches to the Rick Boss and the Hofner, he does a lot of sliding off notes that I never really noticed. What was the song? We were playing a song last night, and I don't know, but he does a lot of boom, boom. Like it's almost like he's playing fretless bass at times. Like he's very musical with how he comes off of the note. It's not just like dong 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 boom boom.
Yeah.
Right. He wants it to be heard.
Yeah, and
It's like part of the. He wants it to be
and he's,
included
like,
in the
singing
sheet
with
music.
it. Yeah, it's like he's like
Right.
singing with it. It's
Yeah.
not just like a note.
It's like how Ringo played to the vocals. He was playing
Yeah.
bass to the
Yeah.
vocals too.
For sure.
What's the difference in All I've Got to Do between the John part and the George part? What are they doing differently in that?
George is doing the one that has the rhythm to it, and
Okay.
John doesn't come in until the F sharp minor, and he comes in with
Really?
It's,
I didn't know it.
It's smooth. It's zum
Okay.
Yeah.
So the whole verse he's sitting out, and it's
He's
not
sitting
really
out
until
and-
the pre-chorus, I guess, is what you call that section.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then he's continuing in the chorus too.
And then he comes
And that's
ba-
on the J160.
Yes,
Is
on the
that- okay.
J160. And he comes back in for the second verse, and he's doing something just slightly different from George, but it's more along the lines of that rhythm. Zoom, zip, dun. I'd have to hear it again because I don't even remember.
And they're all very, not just Paul, but they're all really conscious musically of
Yes.
how they're.
Their rhythm. The rhythms and the guitars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that whole thing.
What is it that Jeff Emmerich said about how he went on to
Yeah.
produce so many other bands,
Bands,
and
and he thought
he fell off in quality of a producer
of
but-
recording guitar specifically,
Yeah.
and then he just realized the Beatles just were better than everyone else. Like they just got better tones.
yeah.
They just played the guitars better, or they just
were more musically
More
in
music-
touch.
exactly, more musically in touch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were just in the guitar more than another guys. Guitars just playing the guitar. They were just like feeding themselves through the guitar.
I feel like there's one of the best things about the Beatles, I always say, is that there's just so little ego. It's always literally what is best for the song. They were so willing
totally.
to let go of an idea immediately. They're so willing. It's not like, well, I wanted to do this for the song. So we're
until
gonna
the
do it.
end, until maybe like Let It Be.
Until the end. But even then, I can understand that because the personalities that they had individually developed were very cool at that point.
Right.
So they wanted to just like work off their own
like
personalities.
this is my thing.
This
Yeah.
is my thing, right? And like John has a very distinct, like the Plastic Ono Band, like and Cold Turkey, all that stuff is a very distinct kind of like minimalistic, dry.
But even in Let It
driving
Be, I
sound.
mean, now that I mention it, even John, like in the movie of Let It Be, it's amazing. John Lennon at that time, you think of him as like just this. You don't want to come even within 10 feet of him because you're just like scared of how he's like a scary guy at that point.
Yeah.
You know, with Yoko and he has the beard. Well, he didn't have the beard yet.
Yeah.
But like Paul teaching him that riff and he constantly gets it wrong. But he's like going with it. He's like trying to learn it still. He's like still humble because he knows that this will like be right for the song, and Paul knows what's right for the song, and I'm just gonna go with it.
Right.
But even though it's John Lennon in 1969, not quite at the height of his like snarliness, but right there, and like he's still just
And heroin
giving
addiction.
himself
Yeah.
and heroinness,
Yeah,
and he's
yeah.
just giving himself over to the process and to the song.
Yeah.
It's cool, that dynamic that he just fell into that Beatle dynamic.
Right.
That is a good point, that they just got rid of their egos.
Literally,
And-
it's always literally about what is going to be best in that moment in that song. You know, like when you listen to, I always bring up Strawberry Fields, like how quickly it evolves between takes. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like it evolves so quickly between takes. Like they just immediately know, like this isn't working. We have to do this. It needs to be more like this. Okay, well let's do that. And then they all are just like vibing with each other. They're all just like immediately like, okay, well I'll do this. Okay, oh, we'll do. You know, it's just so.
It's refreshing as a songwriter to hear their take ones of all their songs.
Yes.
But then it's like by take 3, it's like, oh wow, I wouldn't have come up with that between take 1 and take 3.
And a lot, I gotta say, a lot of their songs, it is literally their arrangements and performance on it. Like,
Yeah.
like I you know, the Beatles wrote, in my opinion, the greatest songs of all time. But also, you know, you've talked to me about this before, Bobby. With She Said, She Said. When you hear John's demo, it's like not really a special song, like at all. Like it's very
No, it's
basic
mundane.
and
It's-
mundane. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what they did with it is incredibly.
I'm
special,
surprised
you
some of
know?
those songs that they brought them in. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Like, how do you have, like, that would take ego, you know, to bring some of those.
But I think Denny Lane talks about this too with Paul, that he always knew that whatever he brought in, Paul would make work. So I think that especially they had
Yeah.
this trust with each other. They knew they were just willing to bring anything in because they knew that it was going to end up being good and that everyone worked.
I think that was George's mistake on You Know What to Do. He thought he'd bring that in and they'd make it work. Nope.
Let's go on to
All
another
right,
one.
you can hear in the playing. I love when in the anthology when you listen to You Know What to Do and you hear the end and it's just sort of like peters out. Doom, doom, doom.
You can tell they didn't
you
get
can
that
hear
far.
you can see George looking around like no, that's not gonna work. That's not gonna be a
Also,
song.
I think either John or Ringo wasn't at that session for some reason.
Oh, okay.
Like, because I think that's why there's a tambourine. Either Ringo isn't there, so it was kind of like
Right.
they were playing on a session, and one of them either was, I forget, something happened, like they were sick and they didn't come. So it was kind of like well, what do you want to work on? Well, I got this song.
Well, I'm not good yet. I'm not a good songwriter yet, but just bear with me.
Yeah.
Please make it work. Oh, okay. You didn't make it work? All right. Well, that's good to know about the George, and I didn't realize that between them because I just thought they were kind of doing the same thing, George and John on that song. I didn't
Yeah,
realize
they're
they were.
not.
Yeah.
There's differences.
There's differences, and
So they were always really conscious.
They were
about doing
conscious.
something,
George and
not
John were
playing
very
the exact
conscious
same
of
thing.
yeah.
Right, yeah.
It's pretty rare that they're playing the same thing.
Right.
One of the only cases is like Love Me Do. They're both playing like the same G and C pattern.
Yeah, I think any good band, like Franz Ferdinand, we always
Yeah.
talk about that. They're always doing something a little bit different. There's no one just
strumming,
sitting
chords.
back strumming.
Because
You know,
especially,
Yeah.
I found over time with songs, you don't need that much in songs. Like the more you have,
Sure.
a lot of times, the more
it's all implied.
It's
with what
implied,
you- right?
Exactly. Like I always talk
Yeah.
about that with Arctic Monkeys too. They're never they never play chords in Arctic Monkeys. They're always playing lines, and the chords are implied with the bass line. And like
Right.
even Motown songs, like it's mostly
Yeah.
bass drums and vocals, and like a horn line or something.
Right.
There's if a guitar is, it's like or it's a very
Yeah.
like minimalistic guitar line.
I think
and
all I've got to do is sort of Motown inspired
the
too.
whole with the Beatles. That's
Yeah.
what I want to say. With the Beatles is very much them trying to make an R&B album.
Right.
It's very.
You can tell that.
They're very
not just
yeah.
with the songs they choose with Money and you
Yeah.
really got a hold on me, but even in Meet the Beatles where they take out those
Yeah.
Motown covers,
It's
still
they're
really
trying to be
especially
Motown-y, R&B-ish,
especially
you know?
second side. First side on Meet the Beatles is very Beatlesy, but like second
Yeah.
side is like once you actually I mean I listened to it for the first time when I was 9, so I didn't really know Motown that well
Yeah.
back then.
Uh-huh.
But when you go back and listen to Motown, it's like wow, okay.
Yeah,
I
they're
guess they-
definitely trying to get that
not
feel and
only
sound.
not only instrumentally, but like girl group wise,
Yeah,
trying to be like a girl. That's cool that they were also like egoless about that. Just like, oh, it sound like a girl group. Why not?
Yeah.
And do boys and leave
And
the
do
lyrics.
boys
yeah.
and not change the lyrics. Yeah, right. Not
it's
change
a song,
the pronouns.
It's a song we like, and we're just gonna do it. Who cares?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
But Ringo's gonna sing it,
Yeah,
so
but
we're
Ringo's-
not gonna sing it.
I think, but Ringo liked that. He used to sing that with Roy Storm. That was one of his songs.
Oh, okay.
They used to have a thing when he played with Roy Storm. They'd have star time in the show, and they would.
Right.
And
I'd
Roy
like some
Storm
recordings of that.
Would bring back the mic to the kit, and Ringo would sing like 3 or 4 songs.
Wow.
Because at the end of the day, Ringo has
probably less self-conscious back then, willing to go for those
exactly.
G's and stuff.
But also, I think he does have a distinct characteristic and at times very strong voice. He
Yeah.
just he's not
does.
versatile. He's not maybe a great he can't pick out like harmonies or anything, but he's a very strong singer. It's very characteristic.
it's
and
Ringo.
and you know it's Ringo. Yeah.
Right, and he does have a good range. Like we were listening to
Yeah.
I'm the Greatest.
I'm the Greatest, yeah,
last
and
night, and he
he's pushing.
screams like if he were to just. I mean, I can't believe like. And with a little help from my friend, he needed like the 3
Yeah.
Beatles to gather around him and like point up.
Everyone has
for
weird spots. I feel like.
Yeah,
I
it
get
is really exposed. That E is really
yeah.
exposed. But
Yeah.
he has it. You know, he has.
And he's
he has
holding
like
it.
G's.
He's holding it. He doesn't really hold anything, but yeah, he does have G's. Like, Boys Live. It's like his throat's shredding, and it sounds rock and roll. I love it. It's like a strong belt,
Right.
from Ringo. That's the next thing. Baby boomers couldn't. Their whole hang up. Sorry, baby boomers. Is Ringo's a good drummer, and so every baby boomer has to be like, no, Ringo is a good drummer. Everyone. I feel like below.
I feel like it's Baby Boomer saying he's not a good drummer because
Exactly,
that's the
back in the
trope
day.
that they've
back,
heard.
and there's that. So I'm going to put an end to this right now. John Lennon never said. There's that. People have said the story
yeah,
where
God.
John Lennon.
Yeah, that's
they
not-
asked John, and he said, "Who is
like a
Ringo the best
meme
drummer in the
now.
world?"
Right.
And he goes,
It's-
"Ringo's about." John Lennon never said that. A comedian
Yeah.
said it in the late '70s, early '80s, and it just became a thing. And it's a very funny thing. I understand why it's a funny joke, but it's never
happened.
happened.
Right,
John
not
Lennon-
to puncture that balloon, but it's
John Lennon never said that.
Right.
He didn't think that. John Lennon used Ringo on his first solo album.
yeah, totally. Right.
Yeah.
he
He
could've
didn't
gone
use
with
Paul.
another-
He didn't use Paul.
He didn't use a session
I don't think
drummer.
that would have worked.
Ringo. George used Ringo a lot. Like they always said, he just whenever you present Ringo's song, he just plays the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's got an amazing feel. He's very amazingly musical. He's
Probably
a great
had.
musician.
We can probably start talking about this in past tense.
R.I.P. R.I.P. Yeah.
Skill. R.I.P.
But yeah, and so the Beatles definitely got lucky with Ringo. But that's the thing, baby boomers. People had to defend Ringo's drumming because they thought he was a bad drummer. I think this generation we need to start defending Ringo singing.
Sure.
because I think he's a very
And then
Good singer.
and then Generation
Yeah.
Z can start defending his guitar playing. If you look at Help, in the Help Another Girl, he is playing an acoustic guitar.
and then generation 8.0
8.2, I
can
think.
8.2 can defend his accordion playing.
And
Oh,
his
yeah.
piano playing. He plays a little in the Let It Be movie.
Octopus's
yeah.
Garden. Octopus's Garden
Him and
started
Paul
off.
jamming. Him and Paul
Yeah.
jamming. Yeah.
Yeah, him and Paul Jam and then Octopus's Garden. He plays it
Yeah.
twice in the movie.
And Don't Pass Me By, I'm sure he wrote that on piano too.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What's it like C?
C, yeah.
C and G.
Listen,
Yeah.
Except on the mono version, they speed it up a half step and it's in C sharp.
Oh, C sharp,
That's a
right.
shame.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so then that brings us. Well, it doesn't actually bring us. I'm bringing us to our
Yeah.
final song, "All My Lovin'," which is the lead up to "All I've Got to Do." At least on Meet the Beatles.
Yeah.
I'm not sure with the Beatles order if that works out that way.
I forget.
I think,
But, yeah,
I think it might not. I think it
All My
might.
Lovin', I gotta say, is a very special song for me. That's the song that hooked me into the Beatles.
All My Lovin's one of those very few songs where Paul, I know, started with the lyrics. I think
Yes.
he wrote it on a Canary Island or something like that. He was on vacation. Something.
Of course, he
one
always
of those,
writes songs on vacation.
But he's like on the
yeah.
beach, and he was like, "Well, let me try and challenge myself. I'll come up with a song.
Billy Shears.
Do
This is Billy
lyrics
Shears versus
first."
Prince.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
This is So this Paul died in '66. So it really, I mean,
Yeah.
but his successor wrote probably 5 times as many good songs as this one did.
It definitely,
So-
we can admit Billy Shears is far more
Billy
talented
Shears is more talented.
than Paul McCartney was.
Or what?
yeah,
No,
yeah.
William Campbell. Well, it's not
William
Billy
Campbell,
Shears.
Right,
but
William Campbell. Now Fall. Let's just call him Fall.
Fall.
Yeah.
Well, let's give him Paul now because he's been Paul for 52 years.
I think William
Unless he
Campbell's
died
earned his-
again,
yeah.
which I
I
would want to start that
I've-
theory
I've
in the
said-
last decade that he
I
died and
think-
some old man
No,
came
no.
in.
I think he died in 9/11, and the new one replaced him. Wrote Freedom.
Oh boy! And that
that's
was
the
his
turning
opening
point.
song. Yeah.
Yeah, it's his opening song. He's the oligarch that replaced Paul McCartney. You know.
But still, like Fine Line though is pretty good, and like there's so many. There's a
Well,
lot of
those
good
are all
songs.
songs.
Still.
Songs in the drawer. Songs in the
Songs
drawer.
in the- Mr. Bellamy was in the drawer.
So right here, Ably House started first. Paul has died twice, and has been replaced.
Fall is dead.
Yeah, Fall is dead.
Fall
and
is
there's
dead.
and there's Zal. It's Zal now.
It's not a human. It's an alien
It's an
that
alien.
they
we're going into alien conspiracies.
They pressed this
Our
glob of alien goop into the shape of Paul McCartney.
Yeah, our alien overlords want to control us with "fuh you." You know,
They want to get into the 16-year-olds' heads. Fuck you. That's what the 16-year-olds are singing these days.
that's what they are.
Fuck you.
"Fuh you," for you. They don't use words, and they sing like an old man. You know,
Right.
Yeah,
And they hear an old man's voice, and they're like, "That's something I want to listen to."
That's that. You know what? That connects with me.
That's that person that's 60 years older than me that I'm listening to right now.
Yeah.
That's my cup of tea.
I do just want to "fuh you." You know,
Yeah, I do not.
Yeah.
I do.
do.
Fuck. But I'm allowed to say that. I guess I'm allowed to say that.
You can
'cause
say
we
it.
can
You
cut-
can say it. It's
On this
fine.
channel, it's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
just say it, Paul. Just say
Yeah.
it. Anyway, so
I love
yeah,
it.
so it started with the lyrics, and then he was able. That's a pretty good melody to come up with, just having lyrics to work with. I mean, I think he lived up to his challenge. I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And it starts. It's cool because it starts on the 2. It starts on the minor 2, which is unusual,
Yes.
I think, for back then. I mean, maybe later
It
on
is.
with
251's common.
251 is common,
but to start the song on
Yeah.
the cadence is weird.
Yeah, not to give
you
any
know?
sort of context that it's
Exactly.
in E.
It's in
You know,
E's.
for musicians that would, but still, like as a listener, you subconsciously pick up on that.
Yeah,
stuff.
even if you're not a musician, you know people
You
know
can-
you can
know
hear
what
an
the ending
unresolved
note
note.
is.
Right.
Yeah.
When you play a suspended chord for something, don't resolve it, and no matter who it is going to be like.
Dung.
Yeah, like "We Are the
Yeah.
Champions" at the end is still
Yeah.
like unsettling
It's-
for non-musicians
Exactly.
too.
We
Right.
innately feel how things should resolve and
Yeah.
whatnot. But yeah, that is very uncommon. And the chords in that song are all my lovin', you know, and it does the C sharp thing,
Augmented.
and C sharp augmented to E. The Beatles always use, it's like they use chords like how jazz songs use chords. They always use these weird chords, but it's not for the sake of using weird chords. It's what's needed in the song.
It's what
It's
they
so
heard.
weird,
They
yeah.
heard it in their head because Paul
Exactly.
listened to jazz albums as growing up. They all listened to not just rock and pop albums growing up.
Right.
They listened to pretty complicated musical albums
Yeah.
or musicals too. You know, that
Yeah.
had those type of chords, and it's like type of chords that as you're learning guitar they don't come up, like
They don't.
augmenteds or diminished, which they used in they used a really weird chord until There Was You. It's has the flat, it's almost like the Jimi
and the
Hendrix
solo?
chord,
Yeah.
like the going back into is it an F or an E?
It's an F.
It's
And
an,
so
so
it's
but
like
doing
an
the F sharp, but with the
minor third
the
and
minor
the seven.
third and the major third though
And the
in
major
the
third,
in
yeah.
on the fourth string.
Yeah.
And I think Paul said they learned that from someone. Like they had to.
Right.
That was a chord that they had been wanting to sort of fit into songs, a song, and they hadn't gotten.
And you
a chance.
talk about that, like George does that, like diminished run out of, or either in the bridge or coming out of the solo too. That down, like he like goes up in this, you know.
He does it differently. He goes up just in a weird pattern, I guess you could say, but just like going up in some diminished shape.
But it's obviously they're very like they're students of music for sure, because
Yeah.
like that's not.
Or they just had instincts.
It is both. They had instincts,
Yeah.
but they also, you know, we've talked about this. They literally learned every record they bought. They learned.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They sat down and they learned every single record. They absorbed everything.
That's what they did with her free time.
That's what they did in their free time. Is
Right.
literally they would buy it. They would get a single. And once again, everything went right. They lived in a port town, Liverpool, so they got all these American records that weren't for sale in England. Like these sailors would bring in records and sell it to them, or sell it to
That
these
was the
record
first
stores.
stop
That was the first
for these
stop.
records, yeah.
Exactly. So no one else in England was hearing these records
Which
besides
is why
them.
Liverpool had a scene, had a skiffle
Exactly.
scene,
Had a skiffle scene.
in '57 that the quarrymen could even like galvanize around.
Right,
you know?
right, and all that stuff. But yeah, so All My Loving having that has very unique chords in it that matches the song. And once again, it's not egotistical. You know what I mean? It's not them saying, I want to fit this weird chord in the song, even if it doesn't work.
Right. Till There Was You was at least they wanted to fit the chord
That's
in.
fine. Yeah, they fit the chord, and they still did it fine. It's not if it didn't work, they wouldn't have done it.
Right.
You know? But All My Loving, it's like it's exactly what that melody calls for, and to keep the energy of the song going. And then it stops. I like that at the end of the song. All I do, ooh, ooh. What's the descending line? Ooh. And then for the all my loving, that it stops. It just settles on the C minor.
Yeah.
It's like they're always doing things like that.
Well,
There's
because
always one
he's
chord
doing
that's
the thing.
different.
Well, it's always it's also because they knew Paul's doing the thing at that point. So we're not going to be doing something fancy in the background because Paul's doing the.
But it's just repeating what you've done the rest of the song. That's
Right.
what I mean. There's always one spot in a Beatles song where it's different than the rest of the song. Where it's like and it needs to be that way to be have forward momentum or to be new.
But I think a lot of
forward
people,
momentum.
I think like even critics back then, they picked up on it and thought they were, they were geniuses, but like thought they were sort of on the like a Stravinsky level genius because they called it like Aeolian cadences. I think is what they called. In It Won't Be Long, where it's going down from the G to the F sharp to the F to the E. I don't know how that's an Aeolian cadence. John also shot holes in that. He also said that's stupid. Like we weren't thinking. He said he thought that sounded like some kind of bird, an Aeolian cadence.
Yeah. No, but it is. That sounds like to me, especially knowing any basic music theory. It sounds like some
critic like knowing a sliver
of music
right.
theory and using it, like because Aeolian is just
it's
a
minor.
natural minor scale.
G shouldn't be an E.
That
Okay,
is such a common thing.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Like anything in a minor key has an Aeolian cadence. But
I'm sure John heard that. I mean, I'm sure he's heard something like that and wanted to imitate it. I mean, they were good imitators.
They were very good, yeah, at that.
They were really the best at like hearing something and then processing it and then repurposing it like in their own way, and being original about it. So let's get into the All My Lovin', like the actual like recording of All My Lovin'.
So here's a thing that we discovered after we did it. Someone we had just finished a mix and I was playing it for a friend. And he asked what guitar we used for the solo. And I said, the Country Jet. And he said, I heard, I saw this thing once that it's the J160. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then he played me the sound file someone had done where someone played the Gent. And then they played it on a J160 through an amp. And it was like... Because we spent a lot of time, we reamped
Sounded
it.
just like it?
We recorded, you'd recorded it with a DI. We record everything with a DI now in case we want to reamp.
DI backup, yeah.
Yeah. And so you record it, and we wanted to get a better sound, and we reamped it. And I thought we got a good sound for the solo, but that don't just didn't. It sounded too dead. It didn't sound right. And then when I heard it on a J160, it was like, oh my gosh. So that's a weird thing. For some reason, George played the solo. And potentially the whole song. I don't know.
Probably the whole song.
Probably the whole song. Yeah.
He's like again. I think the fader's all the way down until the solo section.
You hear John on the Rick. You
can hear George if you really listen for it and you know what he's playing. It's so quiet though.
It's just like that.
Yeah.
It's so locked in. It's hard to hear.
It really is. It really is. I couldn't even hear it. I was like,
he's
I
doing
didn't
chords
notice
like
it. I thought it was off for a
every
while.
third strum or whatever of John's. He's doing a
pure
just
offbeats.
upbeat.
Yeah.
But it's like barely in there. It's barely in there.
On the J160. Wow.
Yeah.
You can hear it more in the chorus when things after Paul sings.
Yes. All My Loving, I don't know when it was recorded. So I can't say if it's the Cavern bass or the Hofner. But
right in that zone though.
And also one of the first times that a Beatle doubled himself. Like Paul sings the harmony and the melody.
Okay.
Close your eyes and I'll kiss you.
Oh, that is right.
Yeah,
but George sings it live.
Yeah, George sings it with him live. But it's weird that they would have overdubbed it, especially given the limited recording technology at the time. Most things were just recorded kind of as is.
They had 4 tracks back then to work with, right?
No,
I think, even.
Well, no, they had 4 tracks.
I Want to Hold Your Hand was the first 4 tracks.
Yes,
but it's the old J160 that has the sort of can sound kind of electric.
Yeah.
It does. It's got a really thick electric sound and
And
bassy.
John and George both had J160s. They both got J160s.
Were they the
matching
same?
J160s. And they
same.
switched. They switched very early on, like 6 months after they
same
got
model, basically.
Same model. They got it mixed up at one point though, and George's became John's for the.
They were the same color and everything too.
Yeah. That was the
like
thing. They always had matching.
Oh, they were
guitars.
giving them at that point.
They were given to them.
I thought Brian Epstein ordered them.
Maybe they, yeah,
He ordered them, but he ordered
they were
the
given by Brian Epstein.
Yeah,
Right.
I think John Lennon just said, I want a jumbo acoustic."
Yeah.
So they got him, that's what I think the J stands for, like
It
the
is,
J200.
yeah.
So he got
Oh,
a J160, and he got George a matching one as well. And they play it on TV shows. They're both playing like the This Boy.
I Wanna Hold
Your
promo.
Hand, Boy, yeah.
And I Want to Hold Your Hand. They're both playing the J160s. And there's a show where there's a picture where George is playing at a show. He's playing the J160. You know,
What show?
I
Like
don't know.
early '63.
Miami?
It's somewhere in '63.
Yeah.
No. I think they're wearing the collarless suits.
Oh, okay.
And George is playing a J160 at the show as the lead guitar.
I think we covered all the 4 songs we want to talk about. Please Please
Yeah.
Me. I Want to Hold Your Hand. All I've Got to Do. And All My Lovin'.
Yeah.
Keep on leaving
Wrapped
comments,
up.
and we'll write them down. We'll try to talk about it next time.
Next time.
Keep
let us know any corrections that we need to
updating
make.
and see
Yeah.
what the newest videos are and
But
click
let us
on
know
them.
what you want us to talk about. We'll gladly talk about it. You know,
We will.
Talk about it, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. Bum, 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 bum. This is Ably House Podcast. Dun, 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 dun. Gotta move on. Dun, 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 dun. Let me take you to Ably House. Let me take